The views and opinions expressed on the program are those of Steve, his guests and callers, and are not necessarily those of WFTL. Now Steve Kane on Florida's talk leader, FTL.
Yes, you might as well face it. You're addicted to Kane. All you Canies out there, it is 10 minutes after 2 o'clock. It is Wednesday, Hump Day, the 20th of Hump Day in more ways than one. We're starting already. On this 20th of March 1991, I am Steve Kane, and I want you to settle in for a show that will live in the annals of radio infamy today. How long we've been talking about this. We have in studio one of the great entrepreneurs in the radio business, a man who I have had the privilege of being associated with. In fact, the man, I got to tell you, you're into this guy for a lot. This is the man responsible for bringing me from Orlando to the big time here in South Florida. I'll never forget that day that I first sat across from him and tried to convince him that we could really do well. We could make some money here in South Florida. Ladies and gentlemen, Lou Krone, former GM of the old WNWS and radio entrepreneur extraordinaire. Not a bad
Steve.
intro.
Hi, Steve. It's a pleasure to be here. And hello, a special hello to Neil Rogers, who I haven't spoken to in a long time. I know you're out there, Neil, listening to me. Nelson, the helper.
Oh, God, he started already. Oh,
no, I'm not
God.
starting anyway.
I want to say one thing going in, because you know this is the this is the radio station and the radio show, Steve Kane, known for impartiality and fairness. Unfortunately, Mr. Rogers could not appear here in the studio today. In fact, to be very honest with you, we didn't even try to get him because we knew he'd turn us down. I mean, he won't even mention our name anymore, which is fine. So I think that what is going to follow is not a personal attack. Please understand, there's nothing personal about this. We're just going to give you a rare insight into the inner workings of radio, things that really went on back in the old days when I first got here, back in 1984. You remember when Neil Rogers had a real radio talk show. I know that kind of taxes the memory, but I think what we will do in the interest of fairness is that Neil will need an advocate during this program, and I think you don't mind. I'm going to just play devil's advocate to keep it fair, to keep it straight,
absolutely,
to make sure that the thing doesn't get too one-sided. I will play the role of some sort of Neil's attorney in this thing, just to keep you honest, just to make sure that you don't go over the lines, as it were.
I had no intention of going over the line.
No,
Neil,
I know.
You know, Neil and I worked together. We were associates. We were good associates. There were moments, fleeting moments of enjoyment that we spent together.
About 3 or 4 seconds.
About 3 or 4 seconds. And most of it was anguish. I mean, but I have no intention of attacking Neil at all. I am here to talk about some of the bizarre incidents and people that I've worked with, and perhaps the most bizarre in my lifetime. And I've been in radio now for 30 years thereon, and there has been nobody more bizarre or has had a greater impact on me. And frankly, probably the reason that I've been out of radio the last 5 years is the impact that he had on me.
The strain. The stress of working with Neil just
now that I'm better,
drove
I'm
you
back
out of the
into town. And, you know, I would really like to, I mean, this show is long overdue because for years I was his whipping boy. You know, Neil, I mean, glib-tongued, brilliant. How can anybody compete with him?
Well, let me say, this is important for people to understand. I'm going to slow you down a little bit. People get again, Neil's show has become so diluted and so emasculated and everything. It's now you tune in for the race results and to hear him eat and to talk about baseball. I mean, there's not much left. But in the old days, and even fairly recently as maybe before I left for New York, Neil is known for attacking management. And when you're management, what are you going to do? I mean, you're sitting there in your office, you're listening to the radio, vicious, terrible things are being said about you. Now, Mike Disney, who encounters a mild version of this, Mike understands he's got to put up with this because, you know, Neil has, you know, up till now certainly been the backbone of the station along with Ranieri. Right. And so Mike decided to take it with humor, and he laughs it off when Neil calls him a jerk and says that management is incompetent and insults his intelligence and all this kind of stuff, which in Mike's case there may be some validity. But it must have been very difficult to sit there and listen to some of that.
Well, it was, but that's not the focus. The focus is if you have somebody who's bringing you a lot of money and somebody who is that talented, you put up with it. I think his, in our particular case, where a talk show is essentially the kind of results that you could generate, and we're not in just, quote-unquote, the ratings game or the numbers game like FM stations are, where you put up with the Howard Sterns of the world. On an AM station, and particularly a talk station, we are trying to get results for advertising. That's our whole thrust. Our whole thrust is the credibility and the ability to do a live commercial. That's one of the reasons why he doesn't like you, because your ability to do live commercial, he'd never had that ability.
Well, you know, and in fact, before I got here in the radio business, live commercials were not really that big a thing. I mean, they weren't, my understanding was there weren't that many of them going on.
That's true. You came in and introduced us to a new way of getting a lot more money and a new way of remunerating talk hosts. It was really almost your, although we had it in effect before you, but you put it on the map in terms of making it a very successful venture.
Well, actually, you have, I mean, I think you guys, you and Woody Sudbrink have to take credit for the concept. I mean, the concept initially was you pay the host. In fact, we do a version of that concept here at WFTL where you don't pay the people, you know, and you basically give them a talent fee from the live spots they do. And that's what their living is. And I remember that first time when you told me that you were going to pay me. I forget, what was it?
Right.
What was my first time? But I remember $17,000 a year, something like that.
$10. So we hired you for 18, and then the first year you did 6,000 live spots, made $60,000 in talent, and made us a true believer. But during that period of time, while you were getting dressed every morning, wearing your suit and tie, coming in and running with the salesman, being businesslike and professional, Schleppy Neil with his baggy clothes and his weird eyes and his incapacity and inability to relate socially, as you know we can. I mean, glib tongue on the air, but...
Well, Neil is at his best when he's alone, there's no question about it.
When he's alone. And when we took him on calls, the few calls that he was willing to make, he sat there like a bump on a log, you know, and then if we were lucky enough to get an order for him, he'd come on and read it so straight-faced, without any heart, without any feeling, without any caring, because he was a big star. He didn't want to mess with the business end. And as a result, if you don't care about the business, you're a businessman. That's why we're in business together buying radio stations. Because you understand the business concept. Neil doesn't.
Well, also the other thing, and then we got to take a break, just to give a little background on this, all of the hosts at the old WFTL, while of course Neil was making a lot more money than I was in base salary, which was fair because he'd been here for a while. I was the new guy on the block. And Al, well, don't forget, Al's going to be in here later. Al was a part of this whole picture too. A large part of their income was what we would call promised income based on the live spots. And see, they made the mistake, and this included Al, that they figured it was the sales staff's job to sell the live spots. And I told you when I came down here, I said, I'm not going to permit and this is, of course, now we have an incredibly great sales staff here. There's no reflection on the WFTL sales staff, which is crackerjack, but you don't want to put your income, at least I didn't want to put my income in the hands of anybody other than myself. So I figured if the show's got to get sold, I'm going to go out and I'm going to sell it. And it caused just a tad, in fact, we'll get to this after the break, just a tad bit of tension.
Just a tad.
Between Neil and I, and actually it was Neil and Al in those days, because they were sitting around waiting for the sales staff to sell the show, and within, 5 weeks I was sold out, and they were sitting doing 3 spots a show. And that caused resentment from the beginning.
Oh, obviously.
Okay. We're going to take a break. We'll be back. You're listening to the Steve Kane Show on the new WFTL. My guest, radio entrepreneur Lou Krone. You're going to get the inside story down and dirty about the old WNWS, where it all started, right here on the new WFTL. The story. I'm just going to let you take it from the beginning. Neil was working at WFTL.
Neil was working at WFTL, and we didn't have all the ratings in the world, as most talk shows don't, and we needed his participation, and then you came to us.
Well, before I got there, I mean, the trouble between you and Neil started from the day I got there. No? I mean, before I got there.
A lot of it started when you got there, because he saw how successful you were in getting live spots, and how quickly you caught up with him in income and surpassed him, and he was sitting there making his 50, and you were on the way towards making 78, and that's really what
that made him crazy. But in fairness, now wait a minute. Before I arrived, in fact, I think this is the story. I think this is where we should start. Was there not a clause? I've teased this on here. Was there not a clause in Neil's contract that was he to call you at home, that it was grounds for dismissal? There was a rumor circulating around the station.
That was after numerous calls to my house.
What did he used to do? He used to harass you?
Yeah, he'd call. As you know, his shift was 8 to midnight, and I would go to sleep after the news at 11:30, and although one ear tuned to the phone, and he would call at 12:15, 12:30, complain about no air conditioning in the studio. He was going to slit his wrist one time.
He was going to
kill himself. There was no air conditioning in the studio, a major thing. He would call just to harass. I mean, to complain and harass. And
why didn't he like me?
It's not that he didn't like me. It was, I would think more, although he doesn't like me, but at that point, I don't think we had enough run-ins for him to have not liked me.
Mm-hmm.
It was my feeling of him. It's a psychological problem. Neil, I mean, I'm not a psychiatrist.
But give us from an amateur's point of view. Right.
Yeah, Neil focuses on himself. Everything is internally. So he doesn't focus on other people. He doesn't love other people. And ergo, he hates himself. And if I was an amateur psychologist, I would say, he really thinks about only himself. He's very, very malicious. and he gets his jollies off this way. He has a lot of problems, the least of which is the fact that he's gay. I mean, that is not a problem. But his other problem, he is sick. He is psychologically, and I don't know the term for it. He has his ups and downs and swings and so on, and I'm not an analyst, but
I will say this, in fairness to Neil, because I have long after, I mean, you're talking back in that period, Neil, in the recent years that I have known him, has mellowed out quite a bit. He is a lot different than he used to be. You know, he is more successful.
On the air. But do you know him off the air?
Too. Yeah, I know him off the air. Yeah, but he's not, because I remember the period you're talking about. He was very manic. He has been, actually, Neil has been much, much mellower on and off the air for a couple of years now. He's not quite as, you know, as...
I haven't heard him. I haven't related to him, and I don't know. I can only tell you the incidents of, and I wouldn't describe the personal meetings we've had or the personal confrontations, but the calls that came frequently, his on-the-air antics. He was very rebellious.
Does not like to follow water.
Yeah,
but of course I can relate to that. Right? What was the thing about that happened before I got here. Actually, Neil was removed as program director just before I got there. In fact, what my recollection is, I sent a tape to you. I was working on the air in Orlando.
Right.
Neil was the program director at that time. I don't know if you listened to the tape first. You gave it to Neil, and he kind of stuck it in a desk, and it kind of disappeared. And I didn't hear from anybody, you know, for a couple of months. And then all of a sudden, one day, a dear friend of mine, her name was Robin Rager, who stayed in touch. She was working in Orlando, and she had stayed in touch with what was going down there. She said, guess what? Neil Rogers is no longer the program director, because what I figured was he played the tape, he knew it was good, wasn't looking for competition, he was burying it. You know, he wouldn't answer my calls. Now Al Rantel was now the program director, so then as soon as I heard that, then I called you back, and I spoke to Al, and then I was hired within a week. But what was the story there, the switch of program directorship between Neil and Al? Because I remember there was some kind of scandal.
I don't remember, frankly.
Didn't it have something to do with the bird seed or something?
No. The bird seed incident was a later incident. And he was doing 2 shifts on that, and it was pot seed, not bird seed. And it was pot seed, and they were spraying paraquat, and he came and he said, and he challenged it, and I was okay, but...
Oh, it was the paraquat scandal.
Paraquat.
Okay. When the government was spraying grass with paraquat.
Right.
He was against that.
Oh, yes. And he asked the audience at night when I didn't hear it, no, he came to me and he said, I am tomorrow going to go on the air at 10 o'clock.
This is off the air, he came.
Off the air. And I'm going to challenge, I'm going to invite people to send in their pot seed to the station. And it created quite an incident. First of all, I told him I didn't want to do that.
You don't think the FCC would be upset by that, that you might lose your license?
Lose the license, right. And what happened was all the phone lines got busy. The cops called me, and the police were nuts. And I went in, and he had it all set up because he had invited a columnist to be present at the station.
Tom Jicker was there. We can talk about Tom. Okay. Tom's a friend of the station.
Okay. And it was a setup, and I went in and, you know, asked Tom Jicker to leave. Tom said, do you want me to leave the building? I said, yes, that would help.
Because I'm about to explode.
Because I have, yeah, right. And anyway, he crouched behind the door, which a good reporter should do, and heard me explode. And say to him that I wasn't going to lose my blankety-blank license because of what he was doing.
Did he respond back? I mean, was it a fight, or did he
No, he stopped. He stopped it on the air. As a matter of fact, ultimately in the lawsuit that we had, we used that incident as an incident showing that, in fact, I maintained control over him, and he was an employee, whereas he was not. He was an independent contractor. But I used that incident to show that he was under my control. The judge ruled against us anyway, to make a long story short.
At the basis of this, though, really was kind of a personality conflict between the two of you.
I would say that, but I would say more so that he wasn't productive for the station. He was not in the mold that he was making money for the station. As good as he was, and I don't know how he is now, as a talk show host.
Well, let's put it this way. There's no resemblance.
He could not make any money for our radio station.
There's no resemblance between the Neil Rogers on the air today and Neil Rogers in those days, which is a very sad thing, because Neil was great. I mean, you can say whatever you want about Neil.
He was.
Well, you can say whatever you want, strange, bizarre, whatever. the man, when doing issues, was one of the best.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, if you had to count the 5 best, at what we do, which is the back and forth two-way issue thing, one of the 5 best probably that ever walked the planet. I mean, he's great. He's great.
He used to
Unfortunately, he's given up that act and now just basically reads racing results.
But he used to compose paragraphs in advance. He's so glib. His mind works a mile a minute, and it was very good. But his off-the-air behavior, which was, his hideous appearance, his weird eyes, his being. Now, maybe this is just me, and I'll blame myself. But that's how I related to him. In other words, it was just an obnoxious thing. And I found him to be very malicious. And I think recently when I was in town a month ago and I heard the incident of the Guard, Gays United Against Repression and Discrimination, writing a letter to him and saying to him that although he was, outwardly gay, and he probably in the past had done some positive values for the gay movement, the fact that he was calling himself a queen on the air, the fact that he was calling people like Al Rantel Alice, was a very malicious thing and very detrimental to the gay community. And they made analogies with a certain number of depressions and deaths, and, not that he caused them, but he was certainly not doing them any favor. And he wouldn't allow them to be on the air. And you know the story. We had him on our show. But that was a very malicious thing. And he is a malicious person. And I found him to be very malicious in person and on the air. He would criticize the salesman. The salesman is the heart and soul of the radio station.
Poor Tom Denenberg is a little Tom. He works over at WIOD, one of these hard-working, good guy schnook types. I mean, but really conscientious, and probably responsible for a major portion of Neil's income, and yet he just berates him and insults him and drags. And I used to, Tommy used to sell a lot, the Steve Kane show when I was over there, and I would see Tommy, and he would be sitting off in a corner, kind of with tears rolling down his face after Neil had done one of these attacks, and I would go over to him and I'd say, "Tom, what's the matter?" And he'd say, "Oh, he's doing it again. My wife laughs at me when I get home. I'm a ridiculed laughing stock around town." And Ken Tobin is another. He just is vicious. But I'm going to say this in his defense, okay? One of the things, this is going to sound very bizarre, one of the things I miss most about Neil is the viciousness, because on the air, I don't know off the air, but on the air, it's a great part. It was one of his most incredible talents. There are other people that make their living being mean and vicious. Jackie Leonard was one of them. Who's the other guy? You know who I'm talking about.
Howard Stern?
I haven't heard that much of Howard. I'm talking about the comedian. Who's the guy? Don Rickles. The vicious kind of, and it's an art for them. And Neil is a master of that art, and I used to sit and listen to him, even times when he would be doing me, you know what I mean? Because, boy, he used to, remember the things we used to get into? I mean, that was the best. It was a riot to listen to. It was fun. It was entertaining. It is probably one of his great talents. And I think when I was implying earlier that he has mellowed, Neil has definitely become nicer as a person off the air. Unfortunately, what has happened is that it's carried over on the air as well, and that same kind of emasculated, that the show is just a shell of what it once was. Even when after Neil switched from issues, which was his forte, into the non-issue type Howard Stern thing, there was a viciousness, there was a biting, you would go after me. It's what Neil Rogers does the best. It's his greatest talent. And now, sad to say, he's a nice guy, but he stopped it, and the show is boring like watching paint dry.
Yeah.
So maybe the message is there, some of our craziness is part of our talent. I don't know.
Well, perhaps, but it was beyond that, because it's one thing to do it in jest and to be, well, not even in jest, even intentionally, but know your limit. But when you start criticizing salesmen, who, again, are the lifeblood of the radio station, and these guys are listening to it, and it wasn't only Denenberg, it was everybody. I mean, guys can't sell their way out of a paper bag. In fact, it was Neil Rogers who couldn't sell his way out of a paper bag. And that was the period of time that you were making all that money. And he was very upset. And he was watching this. Believe me, I think you probably had more to do with his losing it with me than anything else. Because I got off on the fact that you were dressed and running with the salesman. And, of course, I got off on the fact of all the money you were bringing to the station. And this guy couldn't do a live commercial. He had no heart in it. He was like a bump on a log. He can't get results for it. He can have 5 times your ratings. And within a little audience, we can motivate and get results because of the way you do the commercial. And Al, it's not only you.
Oh, Al's great.
Al learned how to do it great and very cooperative, was running around with the salesman, interested in making a buck and knowing that perhaps there was another side. Perhaps it wasn't all that I'm a superstar, but there's a business end to this thing. You learned the business end and then became a partner. So God bless the way you did it.
Okay, let's take a short break. We'll be back. You're listening to this. There's so many stories. I want to tell some of the fun stories.
I just want to, before you go into your thing,
yeah.
I came here today to praise Neil.
Oh, I can tell that. No, I can tell that.
Not to bury him at all.
One of the ladies called. Some lady just called in on the phone off the air, and I guess she tuned in the middle of this. She wanted to know what's the matter if Neil had died. I mean, she thought we were doing like one of those shows after somebody passes on, talking about how they used to be. Well, Neil is still physically alive. The show, I don't know, but he is still breathing. And the Likas thing, that was great. Now, did you hire Tom Likas?
Yes. Well, Likas was hired after the lawsuit. Actually.
Well, tell them, they don't know what you're talking about. Tell them how Neil, you sued Neil and Neil sued you.
We sued Neil. Neil signed a contract. Neil had a contract with us with a non-compete clause in it and was not supposed to work within a 60, 70, whatever the mile radius was, for a period after the expiration of his contract.
Of a year.
His contract was up in December, let's say. It was the end of December or January. And secretively, he signed a contract with WINZ. And we had heard about it, and we met with him, and he sat with Woody at the time, myself and Woody, in a restaurant, and he was due some money for a renewal of a contract, and he signed a new contract. So now he has a non-compete going for him. He's got a contract with WINZ,
and
then he's got a new
contract
with us to supersede the old contract, plus the cash that he was due. So he's sitting with our cash, and then he jumped to WINZ. I mean, this is a story of a gutless wonder who doesn't have any ethics at all, who would do a thing like that. But in any event, we sued him, and we lost on the technicality of you can't call yourself a rocking chair for a horse. He was an independent contractor.
Right.
We had been trying to save peanuts and dollars, and foolishly, and so we lost on that technicality. But I just wanted to get back to a point that I was discussing before, and that is his psychological problem. And I'm an amateur.
Well, you're not a therapist. I think it's better to tell the stories rather than characterize it. Since
All right.
I think the thing with Likas was fabulous. I mean, he had a major. First, he was furious with me. Then Likas came, and of course, Likas went right after him. See, one of the things I'll say about Neil, I've said this before, and I really believe it's true. Because again, I have tremendous respect for Neil's talents for the most part, but there's one or two things that really bother me. Neil does not like confrontations, face to face, and I'm the kind of person that I welcome them. I enjoy that. I like going toe to toe. And for example, when Neil would get a caller on the air, he would go back and forth a little bit. Then he would hang up, and then he would spend 4 hours attacking the caller after the caller wasn't there. He also was not the best at having people in the studio and going head to head with them face to face. And the thing with Likas loved to go after him and confront him, and he didn't like that too much.
Yeah, well, let me tell you the story about how we found Likas is while we were having this lawsuit, we really did literally scour the country looking for a good talk show host, and we found Tom Likas. And we thought he was darn good, and we were going to hire him under even if we lost. Well, we did lose the case because Neil was gone. Coincidentally, when the ruling came down and they interviewed me for television, the television cameras were in the courtroom, and at the end, and they said to me, and it really wasn't sour grapes when I said, we have somebody who's going to beat the pants out of him. And he went crazy. Rogers went crazy on the air that night on WNZ talking about this Tom Likas and blah, blah, blah. And he helped us enormously. And we, of course, did do a great job. NWS proceeded to beat his pants off. Another incident that occurred was you being on a television talk. They had a group of talk show hosts. and I sat in the front row. This was after losing the lawsuit, and he had jumped over to WINZ, and I sat in the front row, and you were on, and you just made him look, like ice cream. I mean, it was a pathetic display of how great you were in that and how poor he was.
Well,
he really
Neil
was
is not a television person.
He's not. But anyway, at the end of the program, I went up and I said, "Congratulations, Steve!" Intentionally got up on the stage, and you could see his eyes, the sneaky, beady eyes going crazy. And that night,
now wait a minute, but we should say that. You mean that when you say sneaky beady eyes, you mean that in the complimentary sense,
in
right?
a complimentary.
Oh, okay.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
And he went on the air that night and attacked me. See, there have been so many personal attacks on me throughout the years that this is almost like having a day in court to thank him. I mean, I really wanted to come on the air today. And as I said before, to praise him for his wit. I mean, he obviously has great wit. He obviously has a brilliant mouth. The problem that I feel that he has is he's ugly and he's weird. And see, I think he's a nerd. See, Neil is one of those little kids in the neighborhood that is brilliant. You've seen them in your neighborhood. They're the nerds of the neighborhood that have these $50 words, and they're constantly talking. And he grew up to be a talk show host, only a superior talk show host, but he's still a nerd. He couldn't play ball. He loves ball. You know how much he loves athletes.
Sure.
But he can't play. He's a nerd. So I think that's one of his hang-ups,
Okay, let's take a short break. We will be right back. Kendall Toyota, #1 in sales, #1 in service, #1 in the southeastern United States. Kendall Toyota will save. We're back with Lou Krone.
Doc Blanchard, the old running back for Army. It's not the same.
Well, this must be his
Doc
grandson because much younger. Anyway, it was kind of fun. It's nice to reminisce about the old days. I remember one of the times for me with Uncle Neil, probably the best show. People ask me periodically, what's the best show I ever did when I was down here? And of course, by far, in fact, you'll remember this. I think you got upset with me on this too. Remember when I had on the man from NAMBLA?
Yes.
The National Man-Boy Love Association. This guy gets on the air. They were for doing away.
That was upsetting.
Just so people understand, you used to get upset with me from time to time.
Yes, absolutely.
But Neil was instrumental in that. Let me tell you that story. It was kind of a fun thing. I had this guy on. He was a brilliant guest. I mean, if you put on a guy, most of the people from NAMBLA, are sicky, weirdo, they come on that way and you go, This guy was very articulate, he was very sharp, and he was a good thinker, and I got involved in a battle of wits with him. Basically, their position is that we're just taught all these things. We only believe that it's not good to make love to our children because society has taught us that, and that we should be able to, he had a relationship with his son, and all this very weird, bizarre stuff. And I pointed out to him that even if a lot of it is sociological, the fact is because we live in this society, if you engage in that behavior, you just destroy the psyches of the children, and it's a very destructive thing. It was a great show. The phone lines lit up. They went nuts. Everybody was all upset. I think people were upset with me because they wanted me to kill the guy. I mean, they wanted me to tear him up and rend him asunder and chew him. And basically what I did was engage him in a battle of wits. Neil went on the air. That was when I was moved to afternoon drive. And Neil was back at nighttime. And Neil got on the air that night. I'll never forget it. I'd only been in town about a month. I was driving in the car with Laurie. We were listening to Neil's show. And Neil got on the air and he said, I want to tell you, that show Steve Kane did today was the sickest, most perverted, most disgusting thing I've ever... He says, I want you to know, after all of the work that he was talking Neil, that Neil, have personally done to create good relations between the gay and the straight community, Steve Kane in one day has destroyed the whole thing. He has created the impression that every gay is a child molester and that they're all into little kids and all this kind of stuff, which of course was nothing could be further from the truth, because I had pointed out that even the gay community hates, the people from the man from NAMBLA. They're, accepted by nobody. He did a 4-hour blistering. It was I think the first real vicious hatchet job he did on me. And the thing that stands out in my mind, because you were talking earlier about how vicious he gets on the air, and of course I'm loving it because here I'm the new guy in town. I want the publicity, and I'm laughing. I look at my poor wife, Lori, is sitting next to me in the car. She's sobbing. The tears are rolling down her face. I mean, he was calling me Neil. Right. No one has to tell you how vicious Neil can get. And I'm loving it. I look, Lori is hysterical. She's crying. Look at the things he's saying. It's so bitter. It's so hurtful. It's so terrible. I said, Lori, this is the game. This is what the business is about, And
well, the point is,
he did 4 hours on me.
You were capable and are capable of handling it. And I also want to congratulate Al, who recently, I thought, stood up finally to him. and anybody who does, because Neil has become a bully as a result of his superior mouth, let's call it that, and the position and this revenge of the nerds, if you will, background.
Right.
He comes on the air and he's master intimidator. And he tried to intimidate the salespeople, the sales force, because he's an important guy, you see. He's a very important man. And again, he focuses on himself, how important he is. Not on the other people's feelings. What might they feel if I were to do something like that to them? You think they might be hurt by it? He never gave it a second thought. He never. I'm giving you.
Well, you're right. I mean, you're right. The reason I don't hold it against him is because he's so good at it. And to me, I'm a theater person, and if it works and it's great, it's unfortunate
on
that
the
people
air
have
is
to get
one
hurt.
thing. Off the air is another.
Well, that's true. That's true. I mean, I remember, I used to do the shows with Michael DeSisto when my daughter Rachel was going through some very, very difficult times, and she was going up to, she was in the DeSisto school for about 4 years. It's a live-in boarding school. And I used to talk about, I always talk very openly about my family. And I'll never forget the time when he got on the air and talked about, who am I to talk about raising children? My child was in a mental institution, And there are things that you can, that even for me, it's very difficult to hear, especially when your family is attacked, to take it with a smile. But again, the thing that for me, and I think I'm the only one that reacts this way, the thing that I like the battle. And I believe that give is give and take is take, and you can say whatever you want about me on the air, because all that says to me is you want to play. So if you want to play...
You had a platform.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, well, that's true.
I didn't have my own show at the
Right.
time. That's why I'm finally getting my day in court.
You had to sit in your office and pull your hair out as you were being maligned. Did you ever ask him not to say nasty things about you
I
on
asked
the
him
air?
not to say nasty things because if you recall Barbara Studley, he was constantly picking on her. And she would come in
used
and
to go
complain.
crazy, yeah.
You did it occasionally, but once in a while, not as much.
But in a nice way.
In a nice way. But,
I just love Israel.
But Neil would demean everybody. I mean, and I was constantly having problems with him.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think of some of the great incidents. Oh, I remember. Now I keep, because you left before when I say the demise, before the final sale went through, but there was an incident that I'm trying to call to mind right in the end. I think it was during the Lycus period. I'm not sure whether you were there or whether you weren't there, but you were there when Chevrolet was there. Warren Chevrolet.
Yeah.
Okay. Warren Chevrolet, now the GM at GSM, General Sales Manager at JNO. You hired Warren, and you made him head of the sales. Now, Warren is a great sales manager. And to say the least, a very feisty guy. I mean, Warren is a guy who's got a temper. He doesn't take stuff. And Neil used to carry on. Oh, this is a great story. Neil used to carry on, about the sales staff and attack his sales staff. Nobody was selling the Neil Rogers show, and it was all their fault. And he asked Warren if he could come in one day. I'm dying to know if you were here for this, or whether it was after the other guy took over, Neil Rockoff took over. And he asked to come in. He wanted to talk to the sales staff. So Warren invited him in to address the sales meeting, and he insulted the salespeople and whatever it is. Now, Warren was very protective of his sales force. And I was...
He should be.
Yes, and I was in the meeting too. And after Neil finished maligning the sales force, Chevrolet stood up, trembling with rage over his desk. And Warren exploded. He had what we would call a Vesuvius in front of the whole... He screamed. He yelled. He banged on the... I mean, Neil was petrified. Neil thought that Chevrolet was going to come over the desk and strangle him, And he just berated Neil and tore him up and down. It was just incredible. And then Neil kind of limped out into the... I remember him sitting in the entranceway to the station. He was just kind of saying... I was like he was in shock. He was like trembling. He was like shaking. He said... No one's ever talked to me that way.
Good for Warren.
Like, well, Warren, people...
Good for Warren, yeah.
It's hard. And Neil enjoys, especially in his situation at WINZ, he enjoys tremendous leverage because they need him. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, the things... Now, I will say in Neil's defense that everything he says about Boyd Gary, who's the program director over there, is absolutely true. I mean, it is true. I mean, the guy is like from Otis, or wherever. But actually, where is he from? Kentucky or something. He wears these red suspenders. He looks sort of like Howdy Doody. And, of course, has no power. I'll never forget the first... I used to take tremendous... You see, if Neil is attacking people you want to see attacked, it's fun to listen to, you know. And he has done numbers on Boy Gary. I'll never forget the first time Boy Gary was like testing his power. He was the new program director, and he heard Neil eating on the air, which is one of the kind of disgusting things that has endeared. Well, no, but it's kind of become an endearing thing that Neil does. I mean, people finally got past how repulsive it was, and now it's kind of fun. It's part of the it's part of the show, and people laugh and people expect it. Of course, it's nice if there's a little more to the program than just the eating, but you know, it's nice when used sparingly, but when it's nonstop. So anyway, Boy Gary sent him. This was a great Neil Rogers show. Boy Gary learned his lesson. He sent Neil a memo, which, needless to say, Neil read on the air. You know that Neil was no longer allowed to eat in studio because this was bad radio, right? Yeah. Well, you know, Neil's doing 6s and 7s, or I don't know, whatever. You know, here's this little twerp that just came in from Kentucky. So Neil reads the memo on the air. And he says, we can't eat on the radio. He calls out to all his sponsors. I mean, he has to bring in like 4,000 pounds of food. And he spends the whole day stuffing his face and, of course, insulting Boy Gary with a full mouth. The whole day felching on the air. But it was great. It was great theater. It was so great. You know, and I looked into Gary's office. He's sitting there at his computer, which is what he does. Boy Gary sits there and he hammers at a computer. I don't know what's in the computer, but hopefully it's more than what's in Boy Gary's head. And, you know, I looked at him. I wanted to see how he was taking. He had this kind of glazed look. He said, well, you know, it's just an act. Neil doesn't really mean it. It's just all theater. But, of course, in that case, Neil not only meant it, but Neil was right. Kind of fun.
I remember one incident where we were celebrating the new ratings that just came out, and we had a big party. And we took the salespeople out, and we took a lot of people. He was on the air at the time. He was doing the 8 to midnight shift. And when we came out of the party, which was a celebration of everybody being up, I mean, the ratings were up, sales were up, and he was critical. He was in a tirade, not because he wasn't at the party. I mean, he wouldn't have gone. He never went to parties. It was because he was the big star, and it was his ratings, and again, the salesman can't sell their way out of the paper. Everybody got depressed as a result of that.
I will say this. I have yet to meet somebody in sales that likes Neil Rogers. I mean, he is. Yeah. If I wouldn't want to be a salesman at one of his stations. He is very difficult. Lou, it has been a true pleasure. We have had a fun hour.
Bye, Neil. I'm sure we'll hear from you.
Oh, no, you don't think. Neil doesn't listen to this station. This is Light Bulb Radio. He does not listen. You can rest assured he hasn't heard.
One time. I heard him call.
Oh, he called in on Norm's show.
I almost drove off the road.
He called in on Norm's show.
Almost drove off the road.
Well, you got to Norm and he are friendly. You got to understand that. For reasons that who knows, you know.
Norm is a great guy, and again, I think that Neil is okay too. I mean, he has a few quirks. Maybe he got over them.
These are not false. These are characters.
Let's bygones be bygones.
Now we're all friends again. Okay, we are going to break. We'll be back. Some remarks coming up about what happened at Coral Ridge last night, which was sort of disgraceful. You're listening to the Steve Kane Show on the new WFTL 1400 on your AM dial. Florida's talk leader, no matter what Neil Rogers says.
See you, Nick.
Hello.
Hi, Steve.
How you doing?
Good. How much did Neil pay you for that advertising?
Wait till he gets our bill.
Wait till he gets your bill?
Nah, it's fun. You know.
You know, one thing that I wanted to point out is that, you know, something he used to do that bugged me, you're starting to do with the night guy.
Which night guy are you talking about?
Oh, he used to bring...
Who's the night guy you're talking about?
Your night guy.
We all have names here. We don't have anyone working here called night guy. You talking about Craig Worthing? Or are you talking about Gary Daniels? Gary Daniels, okay.
You remember how he used to bring Stan on the show and they'd babble and he'd try to carry the audience?
Oh, yeah, sure. I will say there's only one difference, and that is when he would bring Stan on. Stan is a man bereft of talent, whereas Gary is a great addition to any show he sits in on.
I disagree.
Well, you're entitled to your opinion.
He detracts from your show, sir.
Okay, listen, everybody's entitled to their opinion, but... Again, I don't just do that with Gary on my show. We all do it on each other's show. It's part of the concept of the station is that everybody, you know, sits in pretty much with everybody. It's like a family rather than individual isolated shows.
You know, another thing is, you know the way Neil bashes management like Mr. Sloan and stuff was talking about?
Yes.
I'd love to do that to my boss for about a week.
Wouldn't it be fun?
Take care.
Without getting fired. Okay, take care, Charlie. Bye-bye now. All right, it is 10 minutes after 3 o'clock. I don't really want to spend a whole program on what occurred last night in Coral Springs. I will tell you this. for openers. This station is going to get and I speak not only as afternoon drive host, but also as program director. We are going to become very active in the issue of the pool referendum in Coral Springs. Even though obviously the referendum is over, the issue is not dead. And part of what I found out last night, which so horrified